Esther Chapter 9. In the 12th month, known as Adar, on the 13th day, when the king's command and decree were set to be executed, the day when the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, the situation was reversed, and the Jews gained the upper hand. Throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, the Jews assembled in their cities to defend themselves against those who sought to harm them. No one could stand against them because a great fear of the Jews had fallen upon the people. The rulers of the provinces, the governors, and the king's officers all helped the Jews because they were afraid of Mordecai, who had become increasingly powerful in the king's house. The Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, inflicting slaughter and destruction as they pleased upon those who hated them. In Shushan, the capital, they killed 500 men. Among the slain in Shushan were Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Poratha, Adalia, Aridatha, Parmashta, Arisai, Aridai, and Vajezatha, the 10 sons of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. However, they did not lay their hands on the plunder. King Ahasuerus inquired from Queen Esther, "The Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men in Shushan, along with Haman's 10 sons. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? What is your petition now? It will be granted. What is your further request? It will also be fulfilled." Esther replied, "If it pleases the king, let the Jews in Shushan be allowed to do tomorrow what they did today. And let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows." The king ordered it to be done, and the decree was issued in Shushan. Haman's 10 sons were hanged. The Jews in Shushan assembled on the 14th day of Adar and killed 300 men, but they did not take the plunder. In the other provinces of King Ahasuerus, the Jews gathered to defend themselves, and they gained relief from their enemies, killing 75,000 of their foes. However, they did not lay their hands on the plunder. On the 13th day of Adar, they rested and celebrated with a feast and joy. The Jews of Shushan did the same on the 14th day, and they rested on the 15th day, making it a day of feasting and joy. The Jews in the villages, living in unwalled towns, celebrated the 14th day of Adar with joy, feasting, and sending portions to one another. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews in the provinces of King Ahasuerus, near and far, establishing an annual observance of the 14th and 15th days of Adar. These days were to commemorate the Jews' rest from their enemies, their month of turning sorrow into joy, and their mourning into a holiday of feasting and joy. They were to exchange gifts with one another and provide for the poor. The Jews accepted Mordecai's instructions and the tradition they had begun, following Mordecai's written commands. Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite and the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted to annihilate the Jews. He cast a lot to determine the day for their destruction. But when Esther appeared before the king, he commanded through letters that Haman's wicked plan, which he had devised against the Jews, should fall upon his own head. Haman and his sons were to be hanged on the gallows. These days of Purim were named after the lot. And because of all that was written in this letter and because of all they had seen and experienced in this regard, the Jews established a custom and tradition for themselves, their descendants, and all who would join them, ensuring that these days of Purim would never be forgotten among the Jews or their descendants. Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, with full authority, confirmed the second letter of Purim, which Mordecai had written to establish the observance of these days. He sent letters to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of King Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, instructing them to observe the days of Purim at their appointed times, as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had prescribed. They had established these practices for themselves and their descendants, including the observance of fasting and lamentation. The decree of Esther confirmed these regulations for the observance of Purim, and it was recorded in the book.